Welcome to Justice Talks with Jennifer Burton, where we talk about legal matters that impact your life and your community issues that help you live the best life. The information presented on Justice Talks with Jennifer Burton should not be considered to be formal legal advice nor the formation of a lawyer-client relationship. It's time to talk justice. Now here's your host, Jennifer Burton.
Good evening and welcome to Justice Talks with Jennifer Burton here on the news and talk of East Tennessee 98.7 WOKI. Thank you for joining us this hot June evening. We are kicking off summer here on WOKI and we have a great show lined up for you guys today. We have Carren Broadnax from the Department of Children's Services along with Heather Bowers from the department as well, and we are going to have a great discussion tonight about some of the most important people in our listening, and those are probably little kids that are not listening to this show tonight, but the children in East Tennessee, and children particularly that are in foster care or in the care of the department. If you're just joining Justice Talks, we're a relatively new show. We started out this spring. We service all of East Tennessee, and the show began with a legal genre in mind, kind of focusing on legal issues, but we also try to bring things to you that will pique your interest, things that affect you as far as your day-to-day living, the community, and just things that different East Tennesseans have said, hey, Jen, like I would love to hear you talk about healthcare. I'd love to hear, what we can do to sell our homes, things like that. So the show is relatively new, but we've gotten to cover a number of great topics, and tonight's is going to be no different. A little bit about me. I am an attorney here in East Tennessee. I wanted to be a lawyer since 8th grade. And I ended up fulfilling that dream, not exactly the way I thought it would be. Came up thinking, I'm going to go do public interest work and it's going to be, great and wonderful. And then you kind of change your perspective as you mature and grow. And so I really felt called into the practice of law, and I do a lot of family law because that's an area where I feel like I can still have some impact and help families around East Tennessee. We also do, at our firm, Burton McKinnish, we do a lot of Social Security disability work. We like to help those that have come across some really hard times, either from a mental perspective or a physical perspective, and help them to get the benefits that they need as far as Social Security law works. We also consider ourselves what we call a full-service firm. What that means is our corporate office is based out of Maryville. We also have a satellite up in Sevierville, and we do a little bit of everything. We are a firm that is full service in that we like to be your family's law firm. So I have former family law clients that come in and say, hey, I need a will, and we do that. Or they come in and say, hey, look, I'm looking to buy a piece of land. How can I go about it? And so what we really try to do is be there for your family, whatever your needs are. And if we can't help you, if it's something that's really specialized, then what we do is we send you to someone that we know and trust and say, hey, here's 2 or 3 names of people that have a great reputation, that have done a good job for clients, other clients of ours in the past. And so our goal is just to help those that we serve in East Tennessee be able to meet their legal needs. If you ever want to stop by Burton McKinnish, you can. We're located, like I said, in Maryville and Sevierville, but we are a fully electronic firm in that we service clients all over East Tennessee, and we're able to do that by keeping our files electronically and using state-of-the-art consultation outlets such as phone consultations, Skype, FaceTime, that sort of thing, so that we can be wherever you are. So that's a little bit about the firm, a little bit about myself. Like I said, I always wanted to be a lawyer. Grew up in Western North Carolina till I was 12, and then moved to New England. And I've done a stint in the Midwest and a stint out in West Tennessee and Memphis. And in 2006, I came home to East Tennessee, and I've lived here ever since. Of course, I'm all Vol at heart and went to college here. So then went over to Memphis for law school. But I've been back in the area since 2006, and I'm very fortunate that I get to work and play and raise children here in East Tennessee. And like I said, this program is an awesome outlet and something I'm so grateful for because it gives me a chance to interact with you guys, the listeners out there. So tonight I'm going to bring in our first guest, and she is Carren Broadnax. She is a seasoned administrator and a servant to families here in Knox County. Ms. Broadnax is the Resource Linkage Coordinator for the Department of Children's Services for the Knox County region. Knox County itself has over 700 children in the department's care right now. We're going to talk a little bit about what that means. I know people say, we've got kids in, DCS custody. Well, what does that mean? Does that mean they're sitting in a building for the department? No, not necessarily. So we're going to talk a little bit about what that means, how those sweet children get there, and how we can help those children to get either permanent placement or get them reunified with appropriate relatives. Miss Broadnax has worked with the children's services in the area for over 10 years, and she's enhanced the lives of many who've experienced everything from homelessness to her esteemed work has included collecting toys, clothing, other household needs for the holiday season for children. She has a passion for helping Knox County children and families, and she has worked in service to others for 23 years. And under her very successful leadership, there's been some awesome improvement in community partnerships. Mrs. Broadnax serves on a number of boards in Knox County, such as the Metro Drug Coalition, Compassion Coalition, and Faith Families. Ms. Broadnax has a Bachelor of Arts in Social Work from Knoxville College, and she's also the proud wife of Timothy Broadnax and the mother of their 2 children. We got to talk a little bit before the show about raising children, and that's something that always comes into these shows. So right now I'm going to welcome to the air Miss Carren Broadnax. Good evening, Carren.
Good evening.
Thank you so much for being with us tonight. Tell us a little bit about yourself and kind of how you got into work and how long you've been with the department.
Well, I've been with the department for almost 11 years. And when I came out of school, my goal was to be a social worker. And I worked at various agencies within the community. I worked at Child and Family Services when it was here. And then I worked at Knox County Head Start for a while, for almost 11 years. And I always had a lot of questions about the families that sometimes we would run into difficult needs who may have cases with children's services. And I was very inquisitive about some of those things. So at some point, the Lord just told me that that's where I needed to go work. And I went to work for the Department of Children's Services. And I've had the opportunity to work in the role of resource linkage, which has allowed me to be able to go into the community and educate people about children's services and talk about the different facets of children's services as a whole.
Carren, we are so glad to have you on the show. And I know it's technically June 1st, but May was Foster Care Awareness Month. And obviously foster care, the department works and relies heavily on foster parents and on services that are able to be provided to foster care families. So I want to talk to you a little bit about that tonight throughout the show. But we're just going to kind of try to parse down step by step throughout the next 40 minutes or so, like how children come into custody, what services are offered through the department, and just some things you've seen over the years. And then also a really important part of this, and I'll probably bring Heather Bowers in at this point. She's with us as well tonight. Heather is a foster parent support case manager. Also, once kids are in foster care, what do we do then? Because I know there's a lot of ongoing needs for these families, and you have amazing foster parents out there who all of a sudden find themselves with, new little people in their homes and kind of how to adjust. And sometimes these sweet little humans have some needs that are beyond what we would say a typical child has needs because, their home's been disrupted. So tonight we're going to just kind of walk through the process a little bit. The Department of Children's Services, for those out there listening that if you don't know, that includes children that have been adjudicated or in the process or claimed to be dependent and neglected. That is set forth in statute. Basically, these are children who are dependent and neglected and that their primary caregiver, usually a parent, is unable to continue caring for them for one reason or another. The opioid crisis we've done a lot with over the years and talked about like that kind of thing. And we've seen a rise, I think, in the children going into custody based on drug addicted parents. But then the other thing is we've also have children who either they've got a sick parent or their parents financially unable to care for them. Or maybe they were in the care of a grandparent and that grandparent's not able to care for them anymore. So we've got the children in the department's care that are dependent and neglected. Then we also have children in the juvenile justice system. Carren, I'm going to let you talk a little bit about that tonight. Tell us about the juvenile justice system and kind of how they come into the department's care, how children come in that way.
Well, most of the kids who may come in through the juvenile justice track are kids who have committed some type of crime or an offense that if they were adults, they probably could have been charged for. So in most cases, when they go that route, their services are slightly different than it would be for most of your foster care kids, whereas a lot of our foster care cases, we're working with the family as a whole, and it is more family focused. On the juvenile justice side, it typically starts out being individually focused for that youth so that we're able to try to provide the necessary services for that youth and help them establish a better life pattern, whether it is that we put them on probation or give them guidance, whether they have mentor services, whether they may actually end up in some type of residential treatment or youth development center, whatever it takes to try to get that youth back on track to help them be successful in finishing school and having a good start to adulthood.
And I think that early intervention is, you said, start to early adulthood. I think the numbers speak for themselves. Once children, what we call age out, past the age of 18, and they get into the adult system, it is hard to recover an adult out of the system. And if you get in a little bit early and kind of get some preventative, there's some amazing success stories. And hopefully we're going to get to talk about some of those success stories tonight. Just some children where, we've gotten some early intervention. Maybe they made some poor choices as a teen, which Lord knows we all probably did, but theirs were a little bit more dramatic. And so they've gotten the care that they need and maybe some resources they need in order to turn their life around. So I want to talk a little bit about some success stories when we come back out of the juvenile justice system, because I know there's, unless you're in the legal system or in the system with the department, there's a lot of negative stereotypes about those that go through the juvenile justice system. So I really want to talk about those when we come back. We are up for a break right now, so don't go away, because after the break, we're going to continue to be joined by Carren Broadnax with the Department of Children's Services about why foster care and adoption through DCS is so important. We are also going to be joined by Heather Bowers, and she is going to add some insight into foster care and just some resources there. And again, you're listening to Justice Talks with Jennifer Burton here on the News and Talk of East Tennessee, News Talk 98.7 WOKI. We'll be right back after the break.
You're listening to Justice Talks with Jennifer Burton here on News Talk 98.7. Burton McKinnish can be found online at burtonmckinnish.com or by phone at 865-233-1105. And now back to your host, Jennifer Burton.
Welcome back this evening to Justice Talks here on East Tennessee's News Talk 98.7 WOKI. I'm Jennifer Burton, and tonight I'm joined by two awesome guests from the Department of Children's Services. Carren Broadnax is here with us, and she talked a little bit earlier. We also have Heather Bowers, who is going to jump in when we get into some of the foster care ups and downs and how to maneuver that system. So we're coming back right now with Carren. And Carren, before the break, we were talking a little bit about juvenile justice. Can you tell me about some success stories you've seen where these kids have been heading down a bad path, maybe running with a group of friends that wasn't a great influence, and the department's been able to offer some services and kind of snatch them out of a bad path before it goes too far?
Well, I do know of one case in particular where there was a young man that we had placed with a relative caregiver, and she had been really walking with him. But as he started to kind of hit that adolescent age where he was trying to figure out who he was, struggling with his identification and different things, he started trying to fit in with different groups. He got connected with some kids and ended up in trouble. And so it resulted in him over time, with the number of things that had occurred, that they put him in custody. And he ended up in a residential facility because of his level of needs, which they assess. So we have rankings, if you would, for some of our children in terms of the homes. Like you may have a level 1 home, which may mean minimal care of need. Then you may have a level 2 that may have more therapeutic needs. And then your level 3s and level 4 are typically your residential facilities. And so this young man ended up in a level 4 facility. And he was there for almost 9 months in the level 4. And for a long time with his therapist, they were working with him, but he had a hard time opening up and talking. But then the therapist finally figured out that there was something unique about him. Anytime he would get in peer leadership, she said he would never sit still, but he would always talk. And so they started trying to reformat his therapy so that he would always have something to do in his hands, or using different formats, such as allowing him to have participate in a rap battle contest that they had. And so the kids had to really dig in deep to create raps. And so a lot of the youth there at the facility started rapping about their circumstances. And this was a closed audience because it's at the level 4, but he used that as an additional form of therapy. And with the rap battle and him eventually getting to a place where he felt comfortable enough to talk to his therapist, he started working through his trauma-informed narrative. And I think it was only the last 2 months of that 9 months that he realized that the only way to go home was to work the process that was set up. Until then, he just continued to fight. Maybe he stepped down to a level 3 for about 3 months. And after that, they set up aftercare services where his parents, because he was in a kinship home, these are who he identified as parents, work with him with the aftercare services, and they helped him. Within about, I'm going to say, 3 months of him coming home, getting acclimated back to the community, he decided that he wanted to graduate on time. And so he actually attended Paul Kelly Academy, which is one of the things I like about that particular school for Knox County, is that they allow kids to work at their own pace. And so he came in and he was just eager to get his high school diploma. And one of the teachers said, "You must be trying to graduate on time." And he said, I am. And she helped him push through every academic standard that he needed to complete in order to graduate on time. So to be able to see him grow through the trials that he had gone through, even with getting in trouble and getting arrested for theft and just, a breaking and entering. I mean, there were a number of things that he had done to just really work his way up a scale. We learned that some of this was impulsive behavior, and there were some underlying issues that needed to be addressed. And once we were able to get him around a therapist that he was able to finally open up to in an isolated community, it made a difference, and he was able to succeed. So he's still doing good today.
Yay!
Yeah, I still learn a lot of things about him from time to time, and so he actually has completed a year of college.
Oh, wow.
And he's actually working for a nonprofit organization that helps kids who are victims now.
That is awesome, Karen. That's the kind of thing that I think listeners may not know, because I know when you hear the term, for example, the term juvenile delinquent gets thrown around a lot. And so I think there is this stereotype, if you're not involved in the legal system, you just think these kids have, no drive, don't want to change their circumstances. But most of the children that come into the juvenile justice system, they have trauma in their homes.
Right.
Or they have, issues in their homes whether it's drug use, or they're not being raised by a biological parent. There's something in their home that has caused some heartache to these children early on. And so I think it's so quick and easy for people outside to just say, oh, well, they're a juvenile delinquent. Well, no, these are children, and they're under the age of 18. They're still salvageable. They're still able to say, hey, let's make a difference. And just like you said, that young man, just by being diligent and the department being diligent and saying, look, let's figure out what works. It just takes people, giving them a try, because no two children are alike. In the department's care or out of it. I mean, I know I have two children, and we talked about this before the show. They are as different as night and day. And, children in the justice system are the same way. They all have different needs and different personalities and different challenges. And I think it's awesome to hear that, you guys were able to have this child in a home where they recognized, wait a minute, here's something that works. Let's keep going down that road. And even if it's non-traditional, even if it is, creating a rap and it's not sitting, on a counselor's couch with their feet kicked up, talking about their experiences, it gets through to them. And I know just in my own practice, like when I deal with children that are having a really difficult time in child custody situations, most of my teens, especially my male teens, tend to be very resistant to counseling or to therapy. I think it's just, they don't want to talk to a rank stranger. They definitely don't want to open up to a rank stranger. Maybe they have trust issues. So that is awesome that, this gentleman was able to find an outlet. Now, transition a little bit from the juvenile justice system, and I want to bring Heather in somewhat. We have a lot of children who are dependent and neglected, and they end up in foster care. So, Heather, can you talk a little bit about how do children get into foster care?
When there's a concern about any kind of abuse or neglect, there's a number that you can call, or you can go to the DCS website to make a report.
Okay.
And
these reports, Heather, are they confidential? For example, if I see a neighbor's kid and I have concerns, obviously I don't want the neighbor knowing I'm the one that called in and I have to live there. So are those reports confidential?
Yes, they're 100% confidential. You don't even have to leave your name.
Okay.
You don't have to leave any contact information at all.
Okay.
And then once that report is deemed, it's assigned to the county that it goes to. And then the worker will go out and respond and investigate that report of abuse or neglect.
Okay. And the investigation part is key. I think, if you guys are out there listening, a lot of times we will have, I know when you have a hot child custody contest in a divorce, one of the things I see parents do is they'll call in CPS referrals, what we call CPS, Child Protective Services referrals. I've had more than I can count in my practice where I'll get a phone call from a client saying, hey, there's somebody calling me saying there's an open investigation. And a lot of times it is usually, a parent who's trying to go that route in order to get a leg up in a child custody contest, which is so sad. So I think that screening process that you guys have is really important to say, okay, this is either a valid concern and we need to act on this child, or this is, an upset grandparent, an upset spouse, somebody who's just being vindictive and playing out their own agenda. So once the department says, okay, this is a valid concern, what do you guys do next?
The investigator goes out and it interviews. They have to see the child, and then they also interview the parents, whoever the alleged perpetrator is. Everybody gets interviewed.
Okay.
And then they come back and they meet with their supervisor. It's always a team decision. It's not just a one-person decision, so it is discussed and reviewed.
And I think that's so important to realize. And for listeners out there, if you've been through the process, I know I'll have somebody call and say, hey, my caseworker hates me. And I'm like, well, it wasn't your caseworker, or it wasn't just the investigator that made this decision. This was, like you said, a team decision. And as far as, is removal always, is that the first option, or is that what we go to last and there's some other things we can do? And Carren, you might want to jump in here.
Yeah, let me speak to that. We actually work cases in the home. For example, in the last month, in May, we had about 452 cases that we call open assessments or investigations that we had, and we were working in the home. So roughly between the assessment unit and investigations unit, which vary just a little bit in terms of those things that we do go and assess for. Sometimes we assess for environmental neglect, medical neglect, psychological harm, physical abuse, any of those things. We even go out and respond on allegations where there have been child fatality reports or even near-death fatality reports. So we follow up on all of those things. But our goal is to put services in the home to help stabilize those families. When we see that they need additional help, we try to rally around them and put some wraparound services around. When it's deemed that the child may need to come out of that home setting, whether we feel that the home setting is not safe enough or there are some concerns about the overall safety or well-being of the child, then those are the children that we end up removing and bringing into custody.
And Carren, I want to talk a little bit more about this when we come back, about some of the services that you offer actually in the home. Just because a lot of people see DCS as the bad guy, I think, and they say, oh, they're just coming to take my child. Well, not always. I mean, we're going to talk a little bit. I can remember one client I had she was precious. She just needed some help, and DCS was able to provide that help. So we're coming up on a hard break right now, but don't go away, because we're going to come back and we're going to continue our discussion with Carren Broadnax from the Department of Children's Services, as well as Heather Bowers from the Foster Parent Support Case Management part of DCS. So we'll be back here on the News Talk 98.7 WOKI, the News and Talk of East Tennessee, in just a moment.
You're listening to Justice Talks with Jennifer Burton here on News Talk 98.7. Burton McKinnish can be found online at burtonmckinnish.com or by phone at 865-233-1105. And now back to your host, Jennifer Burton.
Welcome back to Justice Talks here on the News and Talk of East Tennessee, News Talk 98.7 WOKI. Prior to the break, we were talking with Carren Broadnax and Heather Bowers a little bit about the Department of Children's Services, and we're going to delve into, here on the last two segments, we're going to get into the foster care process a little bit more in depth, and also what you do once the children are in foster care, kind of where do they go from there, and some options. But I want to finish up, Carren, with you. We were talking a little bit about some services that you can offer without removing the children. So what does the department offer as far as homes where they need a little help, they need some assistance, but it's not so bad that the children need to be removed? What kind of help can you guys offer?
So now we'll be honest and say that there's no one set service that's offered for any family. We're going to go in and assess that home and then make a determination based on those needs. So whether it is some parenting classes, we have a couple of programs that we have connected with us, like the Nurturing Parenting Program. It is one of our contracts that we have, and it is a service offered through one of our providers in the community. It could be TEIS if we're looking at some of the behavioral needs or children needs or development needs. So we're going to try to plug them into whatever service it may meet the need based on the allegation when they came in. And there are occasions when we'll get into a home, like I got a call about a resource linkage referral, which is a low status referral, and it was just for resources. So I called and I asked the mom, I said, do you all have a washer and a dryer? They're saying that your kid has some hygiene issues. Is this true? Can we talk about what that looks like? And the mom went a whole different avenue. It was like, I need services. He's got behavioral issues. I had talked to the school. And so for us, we're willing to adapt when there doesn't appear to necessarily be a need. We first assess a home. If we talk with the family and identify a need, we'll put that in. So we're working with this particular parent in order to see what type of therapeutic services are available to help her young son that's in her home.
Well, and I think sometimes when you get in there, you see that there's issues. There might have been a referral, like you said, for hygiene or for behavior, but you get in there and you just see, like I know in my experience, I one time in particular, I had a mom who had been in the foster care system herself. Her mother had had some substantial issues. She had children at a very young age. And she was a good mother, but she was so young. She didn't have a lot of the resources, and she had no one to lean on. Nobody to say, hey, look, my youngest is having this issue in school. What do I do? Mm-hmm. And so the department was able to come in and offer some of these resources so that she could be the best mother she could be. This child didn't need to be removed. She just needed a little bit of help.
Right. One of the things I will tell you that I'm looking forward to, our current administration is looking at making sure that there are more preventive services out there. So this is not just a state change. I think it's going to be a federal change we'll see over time with children's services across the board. But the goal is to offer more extended services where available. And I don't know exactly what all that looks like right now, but I just came from a meeting at the health department, and they have a program called CHANT. And that program is going to be similar to some services that we would refer families to. So they're going to have a caseworker that's going to walk long term with the family to ensure that if they have many pathways, say that there's a need for a mental health service, they'll help with that. Or if there's a need for housing, they're going to help try to connect them to those resources. So not only is the Department of Children's Services looking at changes, but your local health department as well is also venturing out into some new avenues to see what all we can do to wrap around families.
Well, and Karen, I know, your bio had mentioned you're on the Metro Drug Coalition, and Pam Fry was here from Harmony. And then we've had Karen from the Metro Drug Coalition here. And one of the things is if you just treat the symptoms, mm-hmm. you're still going to have a problem. And so, like for drug addiction, if you treat the addiction and you mm-hmm. treat the underlying issues, which a lot of times tend to be mental health related, then it helps have more success as far as overcoming addiction. And I think it's the same thing with these families. If you treat some of the root problems, the poverty issues that some of these people face, or the mental health issues where they just need some help, or they need medication, or they just need some counseling, or just some training on how to be a parent and how to discipline appropriately. I mean, we learn from our parents. And so if your parents disciplined you a certain way, that's probably going to be your disciplinary style or something close to it. So it's good to see the department moving in that direction and trying to get some headway. Heather, I want to bring you in. Once children are in foster care, kind of where do they go from there? Like, you're in a foster care home. What do your foster parents, what are their needs, and what are their goals? Are their goals always to eventually adopt, or is their goal as a foster parent just to be a safe spot for these children until their parents or relative work through what we call a permanency plan with their goals? Kind of talk to us a little bit about that.
Well, the department's main goal is to place the children back with family, back with their parents or a relative that's appropriate. And if those turn out to not be viable options, then we look at adoption as the last option.
When you deal, and I know that you go into these, you're the case manager for these foster families, what are some of the issues? And if there's listeners out there thinking, I've always had a heart for children, I would love to foster, what are some things that prospective foster parents need to know on the front end? And you've been there in the front line, so you see the reality. And we were talking about that movie Instant Family on the break. But because I think sometimes we think foster care and you think, oh, it's going to be sunshine and roses and these children are going to be wonderful and so grateful to be in your home. What are some of the realities of what foster parents experience?
A lot of the realities, we do have a lot of foster homes that want to foster littles, like they want to foster babies. And a lot of our babies are born drug exposed, and those are different kinds of babies that people don't really understand or know what they're getting into with the NAS, the neonatal abstinence syndrome, with the screaming, the multiple doctor's appointments. So that is eye-opening to a lot of people because they're not the healthy babies that have been well taken care for throughout the pregnancy.
And I know a lot of, I've done we do a lot of adoption work at Burton McKinnish. And I know I've had some private adoptions where the mothers have said, oh, I didn't even know I was pregnant until the 7th or 8th month. So they've not gotten prenatal care like a mother outside of the system would have gotten. And so that can affect, the health of the baby and kind of how prepared, that sweet little baby comes into the world, but they're drug addicted or they've not had the right prenatal care and they have some unanticipated medical issues at birth. So what do you tell when somebody's thinking about, hey, I'm going to be a foster parent, like what are some of the realistic things for them to expect? I think it's going to be hard. It's going to be more expensive than you think. It's going to be more time consuming. Obviously, the reward is you are helping these sweet little humans into the world. But kind of what are some realistic things if you're out there and you're thinking, okay, I'm listening to the show. My wife and I, or my husband and I are thinking about doing foster care. What would you tell the listener out there? Like, what are some things to think about and just to ask themselves when they're thinking about becoming a foster parent?
I would think you should do it. But also make it a whole family decision. Don't just, you are a family of more than just you and your spouse, and you don't have to be married. Mm-hmm. But if you have kids in your home, talk to your kids too. See what they feel about, because you're going to add another person into the home. Right. So having that family discussion, you also need to build your support system. So making sure if you have friends, neighbors, your other relatives, because you're going to need that community of support around you, just like any other parent.
And I know that's one thing I think I've seen, and I've got some dear friends that do foster care, and I know one of the things they've said to me is, Jen, when I first started, I was so gung-ho, I didn't want to let anyone help me. And I think, you get into the process, and it's exhausting, just like being a parent is exhausting. And so I know there's some great respite care programs out there. I mean, what do you do when a foster parent seems overwhelmed? Like, how do you kind of direct them?
We do have respite for foster parents. They would contact their foster parent support case manager, which is what I do, mm-hmm. and say, I need help. And then we have a list of people who help do respite. We're constantly asking foster parents, are you willing to be on this list to help out other foster parents who may not have that support of their relatives or family or friends.
And you touched on something too, and I kind of want to talk about that. You said, make sure it's a family decision, but you said you don't have to be married. So if you are a single person out there, let's say you're widowed or you're divorced, and I know the thought is, well, I'm financially, at a place where, I can pay my bills. I've got a home. I love children. What does someone doing on their own, like what does the department urge them to consider?
Again, it's going to be all those other supports. Like I said, you can be single, you can be married, you can be cohabitating. That doesn't matter. We do offer classes, mm-hmm. fostering from the single parent's perspective, where you can meet other single foster parents. And we always try to link other foster parents up. So, like if I get a new single foster parent on my case, I'm like, oh, I have this other single foster parent. Maybe you guys can talk, and they build that relationship. And
I think that's so important in parenting in general. I was listening to a podcast over the weekend about wisdom for moms. It was actually a Beth Moore podcast, and one of the things she was talking about is find somebody you can go to McDonald's with and talk about, look, I'm up to my elbows in dirty diapers, or my teenager's driving me crazy and I'm gonna pull my hair out. So I think that environment's important for any parent, but I would assume foster parents a little bit more so, just because sometimes the children that come into their homes, like you said, they have needs that maybe the foster parents didn't really think about or didn't know until you've actually had the experience what it's like to have a child, a baby that's born drug addicted, or a child that's a higher level that's been through some really extensive trauma. I mean, there's things, you have to be careful how you address them. They may have texture issues. They may have physical touch issues based on their trauma. So if you have a foster child who's experienced a higher level of need based on trauma, are those foster parents, are they trained? Are they screened? Like, kind of what is it required to do more of a special needs foster child? And by special needs, I mean they've had an extreme trauma and they're going to need a little bit more kid glove than just a child, without that trauma.
Well, all of our DCS foster homes, like Karen talked about earlier, the different levels, mm-hmm. all of the DCS foster homes are a level 1. Mm-hmm. So those are our most basic need kids. If we have basic need kids that need a little bit higher services, we do offer wraparound services. We try to get counseling into the home, okay. whatever we can do to get those services, to keep them in a DCS foster home.
Is there an age group that you have trouble? Like, do you have if you're a foster parent, and I don't know this, can you say, I'll take foster children, but I'll only take them up to the age of 7, or I'll only take them up to the age of 10? Like, can you limit as a foster parent what children you're willing to take into your home?
To a certain degree, you can. In Knox County, we do approve homes from 0 to 10, and then 11 to 14, and then 15 to 18.
Okay.
But I have homes that don't want those little babies. They want the kids who are self-sufficient and can go to their bathroom themselves and can dress themselves. So they may say they only want 5 to 12, and we can do that.
Well, and that's one thing I think, because you read all the time, and I know, like I said, I do a lot of adoption work, and the older children get, the harder it is to get them into a permanent placement as far as adoption goes. And I know for every year they get past the age of 7, I had read, it gets really difficult to place these children. So when we come back, I want to talk about like what to do if you decide that you want to be a foster care parent, specifically how we go about that, and also kind of about the adoption process a little bit out of DCS custody. So if you're joining us tonight, thank you so much. We're going to be back for our last segment in just a minute here on Justice Talks with Jennifer Burton, the news and talk of East Tennessee, 98.7 WOKI.
You're listening to Justice Talks with Jennifer Burton here on News Talk 98.7. Burton McKinnish can be found online at burtonmckinnish.com or by phone at 865-233-1105. And now back to your host, Jennifer Burton.
Welcome back to Justice Talks with Jennifer Burton here on the News Talk of East Tennessee, 98.7 WOKI. If you're just now joining us, we are talking this wonderful summer evening with Carren Broadnax from the Department of Children's Services and Heather Bowers, and we have hit on a number of topics, and you could talk about different things that affect the Department of Children's Services and services you offer per probably 3 days on a show and not really miss a break. And you ladies have so much experience. I'm so glad, I'm so grateful that y'all agreed to be on the show. When we went to break, we were talking a little bit about foster care. So Heather, I'm going to let you and Carren kind of take over on, walk us through the process, like how you get to be a foster care, what you have to do, the services, if there's a website or a phone number you can call to get training, and kind of how to go through the process. And then if you become a foster parent and reunification is not possible and you decide, look, parents' rights have been terminated, I really want to adopt this child and give them a permanent home, kind of how to go through that.
The first part would be to make the formal inquiry about becoming a foster parent, and you can call 1-877-DCS-KIDS.
Again, that number is 1-877-DCS-KIDS.
You can also look up on the internet TN Fosters to get more information and how to make that formal inquiry. And then once you make it, someone from the department will contact you to go over the program very briefly and to give you the information of when the upcoming PATH classes. And
Okay.
PATH is Parents as Tender Healers.
And I was going to say that is a prerequisite for being a foster. For anybody listening, and you've probably heard it, and a lot of churches offer PATH classes, I know, but there's a PATH class you have to take to become a foster parent. And Heather, tell us how often it's offered, and there's a number of locations in Knox County that you can take that class.
There's new classes starting every month, and we try to move them all around the county so it's more convenient for everyone. The first class is called an information session, and anybody can go to that to get more information about the program, kind of expectations, what fostering is going to be. They're going to go more into detail about what fostering really looks like, and you can make the decision to go ahead and continue with that series, but you also have a year to complete the PATH classes once you go to that information session.
Okay, so if you need to go to that information session, and then let's say you're not 100% sure, or let's say that you decide, look, I really want to pray about this for a while before I make this commitment. I felt led this way. I needed some information, but you don't have to make it. It's not a knee-jerk reaction, and you are dealing with the lives of children. So you want to make sure that you are making a fully informed decision and that you're ready to make the commitment when the time comes. So you guys have a year from that informational session to finish your PATH classes. And then what happens?
Once you're decided that you are going to participate, you are assigned someone from my team.
Okay.
And we will contact you and let you know that we are your foster parent support person. So we're the ones who lead you through the whole process. We're there with you to answer all your questions. We'll do your background checks and then we will refer you out to a home study. And the home studies are completed by Harmony Family Services.
Okay. And if you guys are out there and you're nervous about a home study, they do not care if your house, has a little bit of dust on the shelves and that sort of thing. What they're looking for in these home studies is safety, stability, that you're financially able to care for a child. That does not mean you have to be rich. It just means that you can provide basic needs for a child. Because I know I've had a lot of people say, well, I would love to adopt, but I don't know that I can pass a home study. So those home studies are not as scary as they sound. They really just want to make sure, my experience with Harmony and Omni and some of the other ones, they just really want to make sure that you are a safe and a stable home for these children.
Right. And if there is an issue, if there's something that comes up, Harmony is there. We are there to help you work through it.
Okay. So once they've done the home study, how long does it typically take to either get on the list or to get placement with your first children?
Harmony has 90 days from the completion date of PATH to get your home study done. And then we submit it to Nashville for the final approval.
Okay.
So it varies on how long you can once we get it. But I think the total process, you could be looking at maybe 5 months.
So if you're out there listening, if this is something on your heart, you could have a sweet foster child in your care. It sounds like in, less than 9 months time, at least, if you go through the process. So that's exciting out there if you're on the fence. And like Heather said, if you have any doubts, just do it. There's a lot of children out there that need good homes. And kids require very little. They just want love and somebody to take care of them. So Heather, after you have a child placed in your care, there's kind of two paths that they go. They either get reunified with a relative, which is the goal, always the goal statutorily, but sometimes that's not possible. When that's not possible, what happens then?
And I also want to add that once you're approved, you're assigned a mentor.
Okay.
So you have an experienced foster parent who is walking alongside you during this whole process.
Is that mentoring system relatively new, Carren, Heather? Is that something you guys have added in recent years?
Yes. And some of it really came from other foster parents who suggested it. We always ask them, what are ways that we can work to try to improve for other foster parents. And so we've tried to create cheat sheets when necessary. We've done small emergency kits for some people when necessary, and whatever we can do to try to help support them. So just being able to have somebody to call and say, is this normal? Or have you ever experienced this before? Or bounce this off of has been a great help. So having other foster parents who are willing to help mentor really creates an additional layer of support that hasn't always been there.
And I think it's so great for foster parents to be able to have someone to talk to anytime you're going through something in life, a trial or something difficult or illness or family issues. It's always great, in my experience, to talk to somebody who's either been there or been close to where you are, because they can give you insight. It's easy to judge when you sit in a glass house. It's a little bit easier to do it when you're in the trenches and say, look, I've been where you are. Here's some things to expect. I think those real life experiences probably help your foster parents quite a bit. So once you're a foster parent, the reunification process, if that fails, how do we go from fostering to adoption out of DCS?
There's a lot of courts involved, and once it has been decided that the parental rights need to be terminated,
right,
there is an adoption specialist assigned that will start working with the family and getting the paperwork ready, and will walk you through the adoption process.
Okay. And talk about payment, because I know a lot of prospective clients come to my office and say, Jen, we really want to adopt, but we just don't have the money to adopt. Because if you look on the internet and you see adoption, dear heavens, it can be expensive. You see sticker shock for a lot of people, but DCS adoptions are a little bit different. There's some federal subsidies that you can get and be available for, and the process is less expensive than going the private adoption route. So if you guys can talk a little bit, if somebody's out there and they're thinking, we really want to adopt, we have a heart for adoption, but we don't have $40,000 or $50,000 to do an international adoption, how can DCS be a great resource for them to help a child and actually adopt?
DCS doesn't charge our foster parents for adoption. So all the adoption fees, everything is covered by DCS. So the foster parent doesn't pay out of pocket.
Yes. And with DCS, in my experience as a litigator, the rights are a lot of times terminated. So it's really just finalizing the adoption at this point, which makes that child have a permanent home, which is always the goal for a child, whether it's reunified or to be released to an adoptive parent, for that child to have permanent home. Carren, can you talk a little bit about, because you have a lot of experience, older children? What happens to these older children, and what older, I mean 10 and above, what happens to these children when reunification is not possible? Do they end up in group homes? Do they get adopted out? Is there a mix? What do you see a lot of?
No, when children are able to be in a regular home setting, that is our ultimate goal. So some of these children may currently be placed in an actual foster home. And our goal is to allow them to continue to be there until reunification is possible. When it is not possible, then those are what we would already consider to be pre-adoptive homes. Those individuals who are fostering most of the time go into it with the understanding that if something happens and this kid can't return home, then they're already saying to us that they would be considered a home to be a forever home. Sometimes we have to ask, because there are some when we initially place them that is not the goal. But we work with families a lot to ensure that we have that. I will say this, though. The main thing I want people to understand is fostering doesn't need to just don't look at it as a hobby. These are lifetime things that you are doing in terms of impacting children.
Sure.
And so we know that there are a lot of kids out there today that they'll love you, tomorrow they'll hate you, but we have to love past the hate. We have to be able to say to them that, we want to show them a different way of living. We want to show them greater opportunities. We want them to be able to know that we're planning things in their life for them to be successful. And so that's what we're looking for.
Carren and Heather, I cannot thank you enough. You guys are here from the Department of Children's Services. Thank you for being with us tonight. I want to thank you, listeners, for tuning in. Next week, we're going to continue our City of Knoxville mayoral series with India Kincannon here on Justice Talks. If you are interested in adoption, please call 1-877-DCS-KIDS or go to the website Tennessee Fosters. If you have any questions from anything you heard tonight, you can also call my office at 1-865-233-1105. Thank you guys so much for being with us tonight here on the News and Talk of East Tennessee, News Talk 98.7. Have a great night.